about being entrepreneurial. Obviously, a lot of people go to university to try to learn about business and how they can do commerce better. I know, obviously, Dr. Rod, you taught plenty of students at university. Now, how would you like it if you were able to turn around to your students and say, hey, your student debt is forgiven? Wouldn't that be cool?
Are you asking me that
I'm
question?
asking you, Dr. Rod. You're a lecturer. You had lots of university students. You were CEO of a higher education study. How would you like to be able to go, your debts are forgiven?
It's not something I would want to do, actually.
That's great. Look, we've got obviously transitioning into our next story about Joe Biden in our political leaders segment, talking about Joe Biden forgiving student debt, going back and now forgiving $20,000 worth of student debt. Now, first of all, when leaders change, well, they've changed now to say, okay, student debt is forgiven. There's some other changes that have happened along the way, but let's stick on this. Let's explore that, Dr. Rod. What's your view on this debt being forgiven?
Look, the big problem with it is it's arbitrary, and not everybody's debt is being forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And rational human beings are not going to invest in a university education if they don't think that they're going to earn more than enough to pay back the loan in any case. And it's a real privilege to be able to go to university. And I don't have an issue myself with fees being charged. I don't have a big issue with students taking out loans in order to be able to finance their university. It can be pretty tough, of course.
Yep.
And then you're repaying those loans later on. But my main concern with this particular policy announcement is that it is quite arbitrary. Not all debt is being forgiven, and there are plenty of people who have debt. This is debt on their studies, who are not going to be eligible. And of course, there's lots of people who thought they might have been eligible, and it turns out they're not. So,
yep.
Look, I don't like what I'm seeing one little bit.
Look, I heard it, and at the start, I was like, so what if they just forgave everyone's car loans? Like it's the same thing. Like, I chose to purchase something. I chose to purchase an education. I got a student debt for it. I acknowledge that I've got a debt for it, and I pay it off. Like, that's like, I don't understand. I don't understand the government kind of trying to go, well, okay, we'll pay that off now. It's like, well, no, I entered into an agreement. I knew that I had a debt, and I knew I needed to pay it off. Like, I just don't get this point of paying off something that someone openly purchased themselves. I don't know how more to say that. So,
well, the other issue too, of course, is it's not the president's money.
Yes.
So he's actually making a decision which effectively means taking money from some people and giving it to others. It was never part of the election, as far as I'm aware. So it's something which has kind of hit people out of the blue. It will make a significant difference to the budget. And look, when there's a budget deficit, someone has to pay for it.
Yeah.
It has to be paid for ultimately by higher taxes down the track, by less spending, or through inflation. And of course, what America is seeing at the moment, that grossly irresponsible government spending is resulting in inflation. So that's the same thing as a tax.
Yeah.
It has the same effect on the individual and on the family as a tax. So, paying off, forgiving the debt ultimately is the same thing as saying, well, we're going to increase taxes for some people. And I've got serious issues with it from an ethical point of view.
So, I mean, obviously I want to talk about this because obviously this is your area, economics, and understanding the impact of governments giving away money, what 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 is the perceived value of this other than just getting some voting, getting some, trying to get some extra votes or some popularity around the voting or whatever? What's their perspective of this? Why would forgiving someone's student debt be beneficial?
Well, look, there's some gain for the individual whose debt is forgiven, because obviously they're not having to allocate some of their income for the purposes of the debt repayment. So there is some benefit there. There's some gain. Now, whether or not that's going to produce an economic outcome down the track that results in higher tax take or something, so that overall nobody else becomes worse off. Look, I don't know, but it's hard to second guess politicians. I guess, we do understand that one of their major motivations is political. In other words, it is to get re-elected.
Yep.
And that certainly influences a lot of decisions, so that a lot of decisions are made on grounds other than the welfare of the people or the economic outcomes. But I think when a decision is made like this, it's totally arbitrary, there's millions of people who are going to miss out.
Yep.
Even millions of people who have loans that are now held by government are going to miss out on the latest information released by the Department of Education. So it's very hard not to draw the conclusion that this was something which was designed to get a few news bites, hopefully win a few votes, and essentially kick the can down the road, because the issue of financing this is going to happen, a little bit down the track.
So let's bring this back to us as leaders, right? Because obviously not many people watching this will be forgiving billions of dollars of student loan debt. But obviously one of the things that have changed, in this story is the fact that, first of all, it was going to be student loan forgiven. Now it's like only a certain amount. Now it's only government loans. Now it's only some of government loans. Obviously, there's a lot of changing metrics along the lines here. Quite often, leaders can get excited about something and share something with their team and kind of promise something that they can't quite deliver on. How would you approach this or how would you advise a leader of, let's say, an organization or a ministry or something that they've gotten this big vision, they've promised something, and now they have to claw back on it? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, well, the first thing is to check that your brain is in gear before you open your mouth.
Yep.
So be very careful about trapped into making any kind of statement without having an opportunity to think it through. So what this means is, look, if you've got a public role, as politicians do, CEOs often have a public role, say directors of a company often have a public role. You really need to make sure you know your position on all the important things before anybody even asks, so that you've already framed within your mind what your response is going to be. And I think because of the news cycle, politicians do tend to, I guess, act for the next news bulletin and worry about cleaning up any mess they might create into the future, or delegate that to somebody else. I don't like this way of politics. I don't think it actually does any good in the long run for anybody. But it just seems to be that these days politicians, they want to get that 5-second news grab, and sometimes they exaggerate. I wouldn't say they necessarily lie, but I think they often make statements without having thought through those statements carefully beforehand. So look, leaders need, among other things, to be very thoughtful people, and they need, as often as possible, as often as they possibly can, to think through their position on all of the stuff they are likely to be asked. So look, if you're a CEO going into a staff meeting, think about what questions might come up. If you're the chair of a board, think about what might come up at the board meeting. If you're going to do a press conference, well, think about what the media representatives are going to ask you, and have a cogent, coherent response. But I think we should be very, very careful not to exaggerate and not to make off-the-cuff promises. And we've got to always understand, look, even if we're the chair of the board of a public company, or a CEO or a manager, and we don't own the company, we're their agents, and it's not our money.
Yeah.
It's not our money. One of the points that Milton Friedman, very well-known economist, made in an article that was published in, I think it was the New York Times in 1972, was that it's all very well for companies to make these great sort of social statements and give money away. But his big point was, well, hang on a minute. That's not something that the shareholders have necessarily discussed. And the profit doesn't belong to the board. His strong plea was, you pay the dividend to the shareholders and let them decide what they're going to do with the money.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of leaders in public life today have totally forgotten that.
Yeah.
And we see that in so many public companies today, which have got hooked on corporate social responsibility and this new ESG that's costing billions of dollars, and forgetting, well, hang on a minute, let the shareholders sort that out when they get the money in their pocket.
Yeah, that's good. And so for all those ministry leaders out there, like just and leaders of organizations that may not have shareholders, just remember, you've got key stakeholders anyway. You got people that are relying on the profitability and the well-oiled machine being funded and moving forward that you're doing. So make sure that you're making wise decisions for those key stakeholders, so that they all can benefit and yes, be. I think it's interesting you said be coherent and cognate in your response. Interesting choice of words as we're talking about Joe Biden. Hi, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Put a comment below to share your thoughts on what we discussed. And hey, if you'd like to watch the full episode, click the link and you can see the full episode and consider subscribing to our channel. It would mean a lot to us.